Okay, this is the last lecture that we have before quiz number 2, which, including the mock quiz, will be the third one. I will see you at the quiz at 11. After this, I'm going to go on the cyber lecture to change the time. I think we don't really need to wait until 11:15, so let's just everybody get there at 11 o'clock, be ready to write. Make sure you click on the right week. If you log into the wrong quiz, it's going to be expired. Don't worry, it's going to be open this time, won't have an issue. Everything's going to be good to go. As I told you from the beginning, chapter 3 is the largest one. Some students came up to me after class and said, do we have to know all of chapter 3? And I said, yes. I'm here to say that I've changed my mind. I should have changed my mind years ago, but after the two students came up to me and I thought about it carefully, it's really, there's really 2 centuries that we're working with right now, and both of them are significant. We can't cover every century in detail, but the 16th century, because of my background, it does have a lot more to it. And quite frankly, the fact that the Tudors and Queen Elizabeth and Henry VIII are such interesting leaders, the schism in the Catholic Church, all of the issues sort of come to a head at the same time during the 16th century, and then at the end of the 16th century they come out of it improved. not dramatically improved, not like in fantastic shape, but the beginning of the 15th century is a mess. 100 years to get over the Black Death and the problems, associated with the economics and, the religious issues and the trade issues and population recovering. And as I told you, takes hundreds of years for, the population to recover to the level that it was in the 1340s, in the 14th century. So that's from last quiz. So let's focus on the 16th century here. Remember, Henry VII, he's the guy who wins the War of the Roses, which is not on the quiz. But Henry VII himself, you should remember, the country was a mess. There was a civil war between cousins. Richard III lost, and Henry VII won. And he ended up marrying Elizabeth York, who was a relative of the King of York, Richard III. So there is a kind of union of families, which creates a new line of kings, which should live happily ever after. That's the idea. But Henry VII, his main concern is the country's a mess. It's unstable. He's trying to save money. He's trying to make friends with other countries. He arranges marriages for his children. Arthur dies and Henry takes over, and we've talked about how badly that goes for Henry. One of the biggest issues, of course, is the religion thing. You have to remember, as I talked to you in your last online lecture, is that you got Henry VII, 100% Catholic, Henry VIII, his son, Catholic, but does whatever he wants, no matter what the rules are as a Catholic. But by the time he dies, he's still sort of a Catholic at heart. But his son Edward is a serious Protestant, so tries to change the way that the church works. Those pages in the textbook that I emphasized, study them. If you don't study them, that's your own fault. Not only for this quiz, but just to give you a little hint, you got to know the difference between Protestant and Catholic, and what it was like, to be an English person in the Middle Ages, what it was like to live when there was lots of people invading from other countries in the first 1,000 years. These are big topics, and those are the types of topics that you need to be able to explain at the second part, right? The part B at the end of the midterm. The first 30 questions are straightforward. They're multiple choice, not different than the quizzes. I'm never going to ask you really obscure things. I won't talk about Henry VI. What did he do when he was really angry and frustrated? He used to lay on the ground and chew some carpets. That's really not that's an interesting story, but that's not something that you need to be tested on. And you might remember that, I hope, 15 years later. And you might forget some of the important stuff. But really the most essential things about this course are the fundamental aspects of culture that make British culture change the way it does and make it what it is. So Magna Carta, the famine, the Black Death, Chaucer, Wycliffe, changes in religion, crazy kings, really good queens or really bad queens, wars, and other things. So this is a list that I borrowed without permission, but I am very certain that Robert Buckles would be happy to know, especially the fact that I mentioned his names. I've mentioned his names multiple times, and he's also quoted in the book, that Robert Buckles, with his expertise, you don't need to remember his name, but if you are considering international students or Korean students, if you're studying abroad, these are the types of things, these are the types of ideas and academic and advanced cultural models and ways of analyzing history and culture that are at the higher level. Okay, so Robert Buckles, not even sure if I'm spelling his name right, but he's certainly an American guy who was educated at Oxford, and he does lectures at various universities, but his home base is in America. And he said, he said many things. His book is his book's amazing, and it's very detailed and it's very thorough. But for you freshmen learning English as a second language, a lot of the stuff that's in this book, although you may think it's difficult, I have summarized and reduced it to the point where I want you to hold on to the major ideas, because once you understand the major ideas, they may lead you to understand more sophisticated, more detailed, more nuanced ideas, or different ideas, or come to different conclusions as well. But not only that, but these are sort of human cultural, conditions. There are issues that humans have in all cultures. Human culture has lots of different dimensions, right? We talked about, we have art, we have language, and we have economics, and we have technology. And when we get to the American section, we are going to start talking about, in more detail, those specific things. But the farther you go back, the more you see that, philosophers and intelligent, leaders, or not professors necessarily. The university was, sort of an institution that was developed by the church for specific reasons, but you'll see that, especially over the past, we'll say from the Renaissance period, everybody knows Da Vinci, right? Where inventors and experimental and observation and the improvement of, tools. We learn to make telescopes and microscopes from people in the Middle East who have developed this technology, and we start looking outside of our own world to try and discover what things are happening. Those types of people start to really begin to appear more frequently at the end of chapter 3. So what we're going to do is keep that part off our quiz, okay? So this will provide you with some relief. We're going to stop 1603, if I'm not mistaken, is the day that Queen Elizabeth dies. And when she dies, her cousin is the King of Scotland, and he comes down from Scotland, and he's not a Tudor because he's a member of another lineage. So that begins the Stuarts. So James the First, he will be the king after Queen Elizabeth, and he's a quite different person. So it's a great way to sort of, 1600 is right at the end of the 16th century, and some people said, I think it's going to be hard to remember all the material for this quiz, so it's my gift to you. So the last looks like 20 some odd pages. The Civil War, Isaac Newton, John Locke, and Scotland. Okay? So you've got Newton, Locke, Scotland, and the Civil War, which are huge, important people and events, but they all are they're actually not in the 16th century. This is all in get rid of Robert for a second. This is 17th century stuff. Okay? So let's leave that until next week. Let's leave that until Friday, and we'll get into the 17th century stuff on Friday. And then I'll follow up with several lectures on the 17th century, and then we will stop, and it'll be midterm time. Okay? So this will work out fine. So we're literally stopping, even though the chapter keeps going past the end of the 16th century, we are stopping at the death of Elizabeth. Okay? So like I said, that's the page on 113 where it says a country, the English Civil War, right? Which is a country that's fighting itself. So we'll deal with that later. So these are the things that we got to focus on right now. From Henry VII's death, where money and the country was sort of, the laws were being respected, and people, the economy was under control. There wasn't a lot of violence. He managed to sign peace treaties and arrange marriages. England was in a comfortable sort of, diplomatic position. Had some friends, had some disputes with other people, but generally the country was running the way it should. It was running properly. It wasn't a broken mess of uncertainty and instability. So Henry VII did that. Henry VIII ruined it. In ruining it, part of the thing was he took all the money and the power from the church, and then he used it all up. And so when he died, he left nothing for Edward. So Edward had a problem. He's a boy king, and he's trying to he needs money, and he doesn't have very much. So he doesn't live very long. He only lives for 5 or 6 years. So some of the things, I said the church in the medieval period was the center of the town. They were they were your teachers, sometimes they were your babysitters, they were sometimes your, sort of nurses. You know what I mean? They were your advisors. Um, they 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 if you were on hard times, you might beg, right? They might provide poor relief. They took care of orphans. If your parents died, the church would be responsible for that. You know what I mean? They grew livestock, and especially they brewed beer, and it started to get too cold for wine, but they brewed beer, and they made bread, and they were part of the community. They were very wealthy, but once all of that, about, we'll say 20% of that land was taken from them, and then basically used by by not just Henry, but by his children too. They used all of it. All the land they took from the church, they gradually sold it away, mostly to pay for wars. Henry wanted to take France back, and he spent a lot of money. He fought against Scotland. He defeated Scotland, but that cost a lot of money. Sometimes they were fighting in Ireland, but the whole death and taxes thing didn't make them popular. But the Tudors were they had very good control of their courts, and there were people who did want to go to war, but they didn't want to lose. So spending a lot of money on wars and then losing didn't make any money or even balance the sheets. So this war and foreign policy thing just keeps going nonstop from Henry VIII right through for hundreds of years until we get to the end of the British stuff at the end of chapter 3, where the Civil War is over, and the way that England should should they attack France, or should they be defending against France, or should they help Spain? Like their sort of diplomatic policy is a mess. So foreign policy and war, there's usually, just like in the United States or other countries, there's a group of people who want to fight, and there's a group of people who think we shouldn't. And then there's a group of people that think we should fight, on the Navy. We should use our ships because that's, our strong point. We're an island. Let's build a good Navy and fight on the water. And then there's the other ones who are like, no, we should build an army, and then we should land the army and attack castles and capture people and get land that's worth money. So this is always a problem, war and getting along with other countries. I already mentioned this all the time. They always run out of money. It is agreed all the way back, not to Magna Carta, but not long after Magna Carta, when Richard II is a boy and he wants money. Anytime he wants money for war, he has to get the older people together, and all the peers and the seniors, the dukes and the earls and the barons get together, and then they decide how much he gets. That's not so much how it works. It works that way in the Holy Roman Empire, but in Spain and France, when the Spanish king and queen and the French king summon their finance ministers, they say, we're going to have a war. We need this much money. Get the money from the people. Charge them trade tax, charge them on commodities, charge them on properties, charge them on what they earn, charge them on how many silver plates. The French people were an extremely highly taxed people. The fact that the Americans complain when their tax levels are just a French person, if they ever saw the amount of tax the English the Americans were paying, they would have just their jaws would have dropped and hit the floor, because we're talking like the French peasants were taxed to the limit, so they had nothing left. And the American colonists in the British Empire were barely taxed at all. They were one of the lightest taxed people in the world. So that'll be ironic when they say, we don't want any tax. Like we hate Great Britain because they tax it. It's yeah, it's a ridiculous. Um, the representation makes sense. You want to be able to be represented in your government. Paying no tax or almost no tax for anything and just having complete freedom and still having all the benefits of protection or government or education or systems is you have to pay some tax. Everybody hates tax, but okay. So the finances are a mess. Elizabeth finds it very hard to summon a parliament. Henry hates parliaments, but when he wants money, he says, "Parliament, give me money." And if they say, we'll give you a little bit, you know, so you give me some more money, or whoever is causing trouble, you're going to jail. So it was, Henry had he was a very scary, powerful leader. He had control over his parliaments. They were scared of him, so there wasn't a lot of negotiation. Edward didn't have a lot of power to push for more money, so he was always limited by how much money he had. Mary as well just couldn't get Parliament to support her, partly because she marries a Spanish prince, and they think that if they give her a lot of money, she'll make an army, and then her Spanish husband will bring his army, and the English army and the Spanish army will fight together, and they'll lose England, and England will become Spanish. So the fact that Mary is Catholic means that Parliament doesn't want to give her any money. Sovereignty means who has the real power? Does the king or the queen have the power, or does Parliament? As we go through this course, it started out with William, where there's no Parliament. Whatever William says, that's it. Henry II, it's what he says and his family says. You keep going, you get down to like Edward III. Somebody mentioned he's a great king, and he starts the war with the 100 Years' War. He's fine because he's handsome, he's tall, he's winning battles. They give him money. He captures knights, he makes money, he takes territory, and everybody gets rich. But what happens when you get a king who isn't like Edward III? Let's just say it's Queen Elizabeth. She's not a warrior. It's not going to be easy for her to raise money for anything. But she ends up having to fight Spain, because this whole thing is religion is one of the fifth factor. These are all the 5 problems that cause England not to be a very functional country. So remember, sovereignty. This is the struggle between the Queen and the Parliament. Finance. We don't have enough money. War and foreign policy. They constantly are. Well, sometimes Henry wants war, and sometimes they have to fight. It's, they make bad decisions all the time, and wars are the most expensive thing. But their foreign policy is really. Queen Elizabeth does a good job of pretending to be interested in other princes and say, "Oh yeah, I might marry him," and then she never does. So this sort of delays the fact that eventually the Catholic countries that are huge, like the Spanish Empire, the French that are becoming an empire, Italy, right? Parts of the Holy Roman Empire. It's really just the Netherlands and a little bit of northern Germany and England that are the Protestant countries, and everybody else is Catholic, and they want them to go back to being Catholic. So should Anglican religion be the state religion? Should it be illegal to be Catholic? If you're in Spain and you're Protestant, they torture you and they kill you. It's called the Spanish Inquisition. Okay? Bloody Mary wanted England to be Catholic. So anybody who is important, who refused to become a Catholic priest or to profess that they are a Catholic and that they would serve in the Catholic Church. If they refused, they were put in jail, and then they were given another chance to, after being tortured probably, or starved, so that you're desperate. I'll give you another chance. I know you haven't eaten in 30 days. Maybe you want to be Catholic now? Or we broke both your legs. Did you change your mind? Some people did, but some people didn't. And if they didn't, they burned them. So it's much, much worse in Spain. There's armed groups, and there's monks and priests, and they're almost like police detectives, and they do a lot of damage. They kill a lot of people that who knows what they could have done, but they damage economies and towns. There's still parts of Spain now, 500 years ago, 400 years ago, which are poorer because they were targets for the Spanish Inquisition. They went in there and they killed everybody who didn't strictly follow Catholic religion. So this is an international situation, but this is what they're dealing with in England. Elizabeth is a master of balancing all of these things. Probably there would be very few people who could do it. I don't think there would be any other woman who would be capable of managing the Reformation, staying, managing the political, differences and handling the wealthy, powerful people, the barons in her country. Saying that, I'm not doing anything, I didn't do anything, I don't want to have war or anything. It works for a long time, but then eventually the Spanish create an enormous flotilla of hundreds of ships and thousands of guns and men, and they attack in 1588. They're threatening doing this for a long time, but this is a significant event where the Spanish Armada, it's incredibly expensive. The Spanish have tons of gold and spices and silver. They spend crazy amounts of money making this huge fleet of ships. They attack, and the British Navy is better than them. The technology is better. Their sailing is better. Their tactics and their strategy are better. And the Spanish actually have a bad admiral. They don't know what they're doing. They've been preparing for 3 years. A lot of their food is bad. Their cannonballs don't even fit in their cannons. So the only way they're going to win is if their big ships, actually bump into the English ships and they jump over there and cut them with swords. But just like Yi Sun-shin, he's not an idiot. Francis Drake and John Hawkins just stay away from them and shoot them until they're full of holes. The ships are made pretty well though, so they shoot them full of holes and they're on fire, but they keep sailing. The problem is when they go up the English Channel. Here we are, the English Channel. The Spanish Armada goes this way, and the English chase them, but the wind is going up the channel, so they have to go all the way around, all the way up Scotland, up into the North Sea, around Ireland, and come back down. And when they go up top, there's a crazy storm that smashes, over 50% of their ships and kills half their men. There's stories of Spanish people getting, swimming or landing, or their bodies or their ships crashing on Ireland, and Irish people just stealing all their armor and beating them up and kicking them and taking all their stuff because they just barely made it through this gigantic, you would think of it as a hurricane or a typhoon. So it smashes the Armada and it comes all the way back to Spain. Basically, there's nothing left. there's stuff left, but everything's broken, and all the people are sick, and half of them are dead or at the bottom of the ocean. So this is one of the most famous events, because in this war, we mark it as kind of the Spanish Empire is the most powerful state in the world, and at this point they fight. It's like a Russia versus Ukraine sort of situation. They fight the English, and they lose so badly that they keep fighting, but they lose so badly from then until 1600. They keep trying in the next 10 years, and the English fight back, but they do so much damage to themselves that their economy essentially never recovers. And I mean never. Like, the Spanish economy was the biggest, they were the wealthiest, most powerful empire in the world. 1600 years, and if you look up what ranking their economy is now, it's not number one. So from this, hindsight is 2020, so it's not this exact day, but this conflict with these English the Spanish think that God is with them, just as they were in Mexico and South America, and that they're going to sail around the world. They're going to become rich, and they're going to be the Christian leaders of the world. And after this disaster of a war with England, it's England that thinks that they're the ones that have the destiny, and that God is a Protestant Englishman, not a Catholic. So this is a very pivotal period for English. Shakespeare, he shows up. He's the best English writer ever. I'm going to leave it at that, because I'm not sure how much time I've been talking, and I know you have a quiz to look at. So make sure you read that little section on Shakespeare. It's about just before the flowering of English literature. There's the King James Bible, which you don't have to worry about, because that's going to be just after 1600. The prayer book, but essentially these two are together. It's the two great influences on modern English are the Bible, the King James Bible, and Shakespeare. And I'll tell you in more detail why those two pieces of literature have affected the development of English. We're really talking about early modern English, but this is the birth of the English that you are using right now. Now, as far as finance is concerned, Parliament is the place to get the money. Elizabeth didn't like that. She had these things called monopolies, which means things like salt and what's another good example? Nails, soap. Okay, there was a tax on those monopolies, and whenever you bought soap or salts or nails, you had to pay a tax on them, and that was collected. Of course, she could loan money, right? And she could just have people use their own ships, what we call privateers. She didn't have a navy. She had a few boats, but she didn't have a navy. But there's these private ships out there, and English are getting better at shipbuilding, and very soon they're going to have a navy, but Queen Elizabeth doesn't. So she has these pirates that are not pirates. They're English sailors, but they Francis Drake, and I'll put his name there for you. Francis Drake and John Hawkins, his cousin, they just use these ships to attack the Spanish and steal stuff all the time. They actually start becoming slave traders and stuff. We'll have to get into this before, but a monopoly is when you control an entire sort of product, right? So all soap has a tax on it, and the person who owns that monopoly, whether it's the queen or another rich person, they get a little bit of money every time somebody buys a bar of soap. It's actually not allowed in our day and age, but these are a few of the ways that she could get some money. Loans, though, were a big one. She had to borrow money from banks. She had to borrow money from rich people. When Francis Drake and his brother captured Spanish gold and they brought it back, she got a percentage. I'm not sure exactly what it was. The Spanish king took 20% of everything, but I think Queen Elizabeth took more. So whenever they come back and there's a boatload of gold, they sort of hand over half of it, sort of thing. So remember, these are the kind of things. She can't tax unless Parliament says okay, and she doesn't like asking them. So she tries as much as possible to get money from monopolies, loans, or privateers, right, or other means. Okay. All right, and that's it. And you got 3 days to look this over. So, like I said, stop at the Civil War. Don't study about Scotland or Newton or Locke. If you do, that's fine, but that's not going to be on our quiz. But that material will be on the midterm when that comes in a couple weeks. Okay? Thank you for listening. Have a good night.